My son called and told me, "We changed the locks. You don't live here anymore." I answered calmly, "That's bold of you." 2 days later, he received an urgent letter from a lawyer and froze. But what came next shook him even more, because I wasn't done. Before we begin, please subscribe and hit the like button. It truly helps me keep sharing stories like this. Now, settle in. This is how it all began. Dorina's funeral wasn't easy. We weren't close friends, more like neighborly acquaintances. We'd chat at the store, walk to the pharmacy now and then. But when you're over 70, every goodbye hits like a blow to the chest. And this was already the third funeral this year, and summer had only just begun. I walked home slowly, leaning on my cane. My knee never fully healed after a bad fall last winter. Doctors kept telling me, "At your age, you need time to recover." But I refused to listen. I still had strength. I still had plans. I wasn't ready to give in just because I was 73. Maple Street greeted me with silence. I've lived in the same house for 38 years. I know every corner, how the fence throws its shadow at 4, how the right step on the porch creaks, the tidy little homes, the blooming gardens. This old, quiet neighborhood had been my whole world. But lately, my son Igor had been pushing me to leave it behind. "Mom, it's too much for you now," he'd say. "The stove, the water, the stairs. What if something happens?" I'd just smile and reply, "It's 5 steps. I'm fine." But he kept bringing it up. He and his wife Jana found a senior home. Sunny Hill, nice view, meals on schedule, medical care. I visited once. It was clean, calm, lifeless. It didn't smell like home. It smelled like medicine. It was all about routines, quiet halls, and waiting. It wasn't for me. Not yet. I climbed the steps and reached for my keys, slid one into the lock. It didn't turn. Tried again. Click. Nothing. I tried another. Then the whole key ring. Still nothing. And then it hit me. The locks had been changed. I stood there, holding my cane, feeling the cold creep up from inside. This wasn't a mistake or some unfortunate mix-up. No, this was intentional. I pulled out my phone, one of the few modern gadgets I'd finally given into. Igor had insisted, "Just in case, Mom." So I tapped on his name. It rang. On the 3rd ring, he picked up. "Mom, are you home already?" he asked. "I would be," I replied evenly, "if I could get inside." None of the keys work. He fell quiet, but I could hear it. The pause, the guilt. Then came the words I already suspected. "We changed the locks," he admitted. "I was going to tell you. Jana and I think it's for the best. You've said yourself it's been hard for you to get around lately." "My house is 1 story, Igor. I have 5 steps to the porch," I reminded him. "Mom, yesterday you left the stove on," he said quickly. I stepped out for a minute. The phone rang. "You'd left it on." "I would have come back," I said. But Jana, as usual, let herself in without knocking, and saw it before I had the chance. Silence again. Then he added, "We've set up a room for you at our place, and after that, you'll move to Sunny Hill. I've already arranged everything." A room with a balcony just opened up. I stayed quiet for a long moment, then asked calmly, "So, I don't live here anymore?" "Don't say it like that, Mom. We're looking out for you. You've been forgetting your pills. You leave the water running." "How considerate," I cut in. "While I was at a funeral, you changed the locks and started packing up my things?" "Jana's only taking the essentials," he tried to explain. "I can come get you, or Jana can." "No," I said. "I'll find somewhere else to sleep tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk, with the documents, on the table." "Mom, you don't understand," he began, but I ended the call. I took a deep breath and looked around. Not a single neighbor in sight, and thank God. At least they didn't get to witness this moment. Still, I couldn't pretend to be shocked. This had been coming for a while. Igor had been talking more and more about the retirement home. Jana had started barging in without warning, checking if I took my pills, if the lights were off, if the stove was cool. And the grandkids, Kirill and Tanya, well, they were getting bolder. "Grandma, what's going to happen to the house when you're gone?" I'm not blind. I saw the way Jana admired my china set like it was already hers, the way Igor subconsciously assessed the value of every stick of furniture. I even overheard Kirill on the phone once saying, "Grandma's house? That's gold. This neighborhood's going up fast." I pulled out my phone again and dialed a different number. "Hello, Vera? It's Lydia Petrovna. Remember me? I taught math at your school." She laughed softly and replied, "Of course I remember. You were the one who made me solve equations on Sundays." Now, she was a lawyer, and I had a feeling I might need her help. "As soon as possible," I told her. 20 minutes later, a taxi arrived. I turned and looked back at the house, the windows, the porch, the flower bed filled with lilies. It stood there quietly, peacefully, just as it always had, my home, only now, locked away from me. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. If my son thought I was too old to stand up for myself, then he didn't know me at all. I am Lydia Petrovna. I taught mathematics for 35 years. And if life has a pattern, a formula, I will find it. And if someone started a game against me, they clearly didn't realize who they were dealing with. The taxi took me to a business center in the heart of Penza, a sleek glass building with security at the entrance, elevators humming in the background, and a marble floor that gleamed under the lights. Vera's office was on the 8th floor. The nameplate on the door read, Kveleva and Partners. Inside, the space was clean and professional. Just a desk, a few shelves lined with documents, and a couple of quiet landscape paintings. Understated, but welcoming. Vera greeted me with a warm smile. She looked to be nearing 40 now. Short, tidy haircut, confident posture, calm, and clear voice. But even now, I could still see the girl she used to be, the one with the braids who solved the hardest math problems faster than anyone else in her class. She closed the notebook where she'd been jotting down notes from my story and shook her head. "What your son did isn't just wrong," she said. "It's illegal. He took control of your property while you were away." "I don't want to sue Igor," I said, feeling the weight of it all. "He's my son. I'm just tired." Vera nodded. "Then we'll find another way. But first, let's check the documents. Who's the official owner of the house?" I opened a folder I'd been keeping for more than 6 months. Ever since I started noticing Igor's unusual interest in my accounts, I'd quietly gathered everything in one place: purchase contracts, mortgage records, bank papers, even my will. Vera flipped through the documents slowly, carefully. When she finished, she looked up. "The house is fully yours," she said. "The mortgage is paid off. There are no liens. You're the sole legal owner. He has no right to control even a single square foot of that property," Vera said firmly. I nodded. "Good. Now, let's draft the letter. I want him to understand just how serious this is." "We'll take care of it," she said. "But where will you stay in the meantime?" I shrugged. "I'll rent something, or maybe a hotel." "Don't even think about it," Vera said, shaking her head. "I have a spare room. Stay with me as long as you need to. No arguments." I opened my mouth to protest, but she stopped me with a single gesture. "You were the first adult who ever believed in me," she said quietly. "You told me that even a plumber's daughter could become a lawyer. Because of you, I didn't give up. So now, it's my turn to help you." And just like that, I let go. That evening, we went to her apartment. It was a warm, inviting space filled with light, with big windows overlooking the city. The shelves held law books and photos from her school graduation. In the guest room, there was a neatly made bed, a soft plaid blanket, and a vase of daisies. Something about it touched me deeply. I placed the only personal item I'd brought from home on the nightstand, a photo in a silver frame. Me and my late husband, Lenya. We were standing in front of our house, holding the keys we'd just received, laughing, young, disheveled, happy. I sat down on the bed and stared at the photo. So many years had passed. Lenya got sick when Igor was only 8. After that, it was just me. I kept teaching, picked up extra work, led after-school clubs. I juggled the mortgage, activity fees, tutors. I graded papers at night, then cried quietly in the bathroom so no one would hear. But we made it. I gave everything I had for that boy. He got into university, became a financial advisor, started a family. I was proud of him. And now, he was throwing me out of my own home. No warning, no shame. The next morning, Vera and I went to the bank. I requested full statements for all my accounts over the past 5 years. The manager printed everything out politely. I also signed the paperwork to remove Igor as a trusted party. He would no longer have access to a single cent of my money. Then we visited another bank, where I kept a safety deposit box. Inside were my original documents, my will, and a small voice recorder, no bigger than a pack of cigarettes. I'd been recording things for 3 years now, conversations with my son and his family, not out of spite, out of caution. I could feel it. Something was coming, a shift I couldn't quite name. But I wasn't scared. I'd already taken what truly mattered with me. The rest, just things. Back at Vera's office, she laid out the paperwork across her desk with the precision of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. "This is a strong case," she said. "Account statements, legal documents, transaction histories, audio recordings. We've got a solid position." "I'm not trying to destroy his life," I said softly. "He's still my son, and you have the right to protect yours," she replied, calm and clear. So we wrote the letter, measured, professional, and legally precise. But underneath, it was sharp. We included everything: the illegal lock change, the attempted forced eviction, the misuse of power of attorney to access my accounts, and at the end, a clear demand: restore access to the property immediately. I asked her to add a note about emotional distress. I wanted them to know this wasn't a family squabble, it was serious. The letter went out to both his home and his office. Let his coworkers see what kind of caring son they've got on staff. That evening, Vera and I shared a quiet glass of wine. To justice, she said. To life lessons, I answered. The next morning, after she left for work, I stayed behind in her apartment, sipping tea near the window. Below, the city moved at its own pace. In the park, children played, young mothers chatted, and older couples strolled slowly with canes. Life carried on like nothing had happened. Everyone had their rhythm, their routine. Meanwhile, I was standing in the middle of a storm. Yesterday, I had a home, a life that felt settled. Today, I was in the middle of a battle. And yet, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel old. I felt something stir inside me, something strong, a quiet resolve, calm, but unyielding. I remembered who I used to be, focused, calculating, steady in chaos. That's the woman who raised Igor alone after Lenya died. And if I have to become her again, I will. I am not some fragile old woman you can pack off to a nursing home and forget. The letter arrived just as planned. A courier handed it to Igor at his office, signature required. The second copy went straight to his house. I pictured him reading those words: illegal eviction, unauthorized access to funds, potential criminal charges. I could almost see his face go pale, his mouth tighten, his expression fall. Vera called that evening to say his secretary mentioned he'd taken the day off, told them it was a family emergency. So, he read it. Let him think, I said. I've got everything I need now. The rest didn't matter. You could call the police, Vera said. Technically, he broke into your house without permission. He's probably there right now, going through your things. I shook my head. He's still my son. Let him sit with it. Let him feel what he's done. 2 days passed. On the third, my phone rang. It was Igor. I didn't answer. Then came a second call, followed by silence. A text appeared. Mom, let's talk. Not over the phone, in person. Vera and I picked the place, Southern Wind, a small, cozy cafe I used to love. I'd celebrated the last day of school there with colleagues. I'd taken Igor there for pastries when he was little. Now it was something else, a neutral ground. Memories pulled at me as we walked. Vera looked confident in her light-colored suit, and I kept my posture tall, holding my new cane like it was an extension of myself. When we arrived, Igor was already there, sitting at a table in the back, nervously turning a coffee cup in his hands. He looked rough, wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes, a few days' worth of stubble. He stood up when we approached. Mom, he started, reaching toward me. I stepped aside. Let's skip the theater. Sit. I pulled out a small voice recorder and placed it on the table. He stiffened. What's that? I'm recording this conversation, I said. If you don't mind, I want everything you say to be honest. He tried to smile. Mom, we're family. Exactly. And family doesn't do what you did. The waitress came over, left some napkins, and took our order. Vera asked for water. Igor stuck with coffee, and I ordered tea. Then came a long silence. Mom, I know how this looks, he finally said, but I didn't mean to hurt you. He stumbled. You changed the locks on my home while I was at a funeral, I said, voice steady. That's not care. That's betrayal. He dropped his gaze. I was going to explain, really. Oh? And the $80 you withdrew from my account last year? Were you planning to explain that too? His eyes shot up. How did you? I pulled out a printed statement. I'm a math teacher, Igor. I know how to count. You've been quietly taking small amounts for 5 years, thinking I wouldn't notice. I noticed everything. I just kept waiting for the moment you'd come and say, Mom, I need help. But you never did. You were stealing, I said quietly. That's not theft, he replied, eyes down. I was going to pay it back. I wanted to. But you didn't. He stared at the table, face pale and jaw tight, saying nothing. I kept going. You planned to sell my house, move me into a care facility, and use the money to pay off your debts. Mom, I owe $200,000, he muttered. I invested in crypto. It failed. Then he added, I didn't want to use client money. I froze. Clients? He tensed immediately, realizing he'd said too much. It was temporary. I meant to return it all before the audit. With interest, Vera spoke for the first time, calm and firm. You do understand that's a criminal offense? He nodded, lowering his head. I do. Then listen, I said. We've put together a plan, not to punish you, but to give you a way out. Vera placed the documents on the table. Everything was clear. Sell your share in the firm, sell the car, cut your personal expenses. It would be enough to cover the debt. He stared at the paperwork like he couldn't make sense of it. You're asking me to give up everything I've built for 15 years? No, I said. We're offering you the chance not to go to prison. He exhaled, long and slow. I need time to think. You have 3 days, Vera answered. And one more thing, I added. Give me the keys, now. Without arguing, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the keyring, and set it on the table. I took it, but didn't put it away. Instead, I leaned in. Remember, this house isn't your inheritance from your father. It's mine. I bought it with money from selling my parents' apartment. I paid off the mortgage myself. I worked nights, raised you, fed you, clothed you, supported you, and I won't let you treat me like a burden to be removed. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, in a soft, hoarse voice, he said, I'm sorry, Mom. I looked him in the eyes and answered, Don't say it for me. Say it for yourself, and fix it. He nodded, stood up, and walked away. The keys remained on the table. Vera and I stayed seated a little longer. She finished her water. I slowly drank what was left of my tea, lukewarm, but oddly comforting. There was no sense of victory in me, just exhaustion, but also peace. He hadn't screamed. He hadn't lied. He didn't threaten me. He listened. That was the first time in a long while. You were strong, Vera said quietly. I shrugged. I just told the truth. Sometimes truth needs to be spoken aloud. Otherwise, everyone pretends it doesn't exist. We walked home together. The day was clear, the air filled with the scent of linden trees. Summer was almost here. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this way. Free. The next day, Vera and I returned to my house. She handed me a new set of keys. We'd changed the old lock, just in case. I stood on the porch like a guest, but this time I had access. I slid the key in, turned it, and the door opened with a soft click. The first thing I felt was a strange emptiness. The house looked the same. Cabinet, clock, armchair, but something was off. The drawers were slightly ajar. The stacks of books tilted, the rug in the living room rumpled. Igor had been searching for something. Maybe documents, maybe recordings, maybe both. He hadn't found anything. I walked through the room slowly, pausing at the shelves to straighten books, smoothing out curtains, restoring the rhythm of the place. In the bedroom, I opened the small jewelry box. Lenya's wedding ring was still there. So not everything in Igor was lost. Something in him had remained. For the next week, I focused on reclaiming my space, tossing out old newspapers, moving books, scrubbing floors as if I could wipe away the presence he left behind. It felt like returning, like becoming the owner again, fully and without hesitation. And all that time, silence, no calls, no messages. On the 8th day, someone rang the doorbell. I opened it to find Kirill, my grandson, standing on the porch, nervous, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Hi, Grandma. Can I come in? I nodded silently and stepped aside. We sat in the kitchen while I placed the flowers in a vase and put the kettle on. He didn't speak, just twisted a napkin in his hands. Once we were seated, he finally asked, How are you? I'm fine, I said. And you? He looked down. Not so great. Things aren't great at home, Kirill said softly. My parents argue all the time. Tanya barely stays there. She's been living at her friend's place. He paused. And you? I asked gently. He fell quiet for a moment. I just miss how things used to be, when we were a normal family. When we'd visit you on Sundays, you'd bake a pie. Dad would make jokes, and Mom would smile. It felt real. Something tightened in my chest. He was right. None of it fell apart overnight. It had been breaking down for years, slowly, silently. I used to bake Igor's favorite pie every weekend. We used to gather around the table. Then it became once a month, then only on holidays, then not at all, unless there was a reason. You know, Kirill, I said quietly, sometimes you can't bring the past back, but you can build something new, if you want to. He nodded. Can we start coming over again? Just Sunday lunch? Yes, I smiled. Let's start this Sunday. I'll be there, he said, and I'll try to convince Tanya too. And your parents? I asked. Invite them, he said. If they come, good. If not, maybe they're not ready yet. I agreed. Everyone has their own path. On Sunday, I woke up early and baked the apple pie, crisp crust, cinnamon on top, just like Igor loved as a child. I roasted chicken with herbs, made mashed potatoes, chopped a salad, and set the table the way I used to, carefully, lovingly. At 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Kirill arrived first, helped arrange the chairs, and brought a bottle of wine. Then came Tanya, unexpectedly serious, holding a box of pastries. I was about to say this was already enough when the bell rang a third time. Igor and Jana stood on the doorstep, both quiet, standing slightly apart, but they came, and that was what mattered. Dinner started stiffly, short phrases, eyes focused on plates, but food has its magic. The pie smelled like comfort, the chicken got compliments, Tanya talked about her internship, Kirill about a project at work. Even Jana smiled a little when I complimented her new haircut. Only Igor stayed quiet. After dessert, the grandkids moved to the living room to watch a movie. Jana helped me with the dishes, while Igor stood alone in the corner of the kitchen. I walked over to him. "How are you?" He shrugged. He'd sold his share in the firm, paid off most of the debt, and was looking for work. "It was hard," he said, but he was managing. "You'll get through it," I told him. He gave a wry smile. "A financial advisor who drowned in debt. Who'd hire me?" "I have an idea," I said. "Remember Pelevin, the economist we used to work with at the school?" He nodded. "He runs the Financial Literacy Center now. He's looking for a trainer. I spoke with him. He's open to meeting." Igor looked at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You recommended me?" "You're my son," I said. "And yes, you made a serious mistake, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve a second chance." He nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, he looked at me with real gratitude. "Thank you, Mom." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just be honest this time. Really honest." 2 months passed since that Sunday lunch. We'd been gathering every week since. Sometimes it was just Kirill and Tanya. Other times, Igor and even Jana joined. It wasn't always easy. We never pretended nothing had happened. But over time, we learned how to listen to each other again. Igor eventually took the job at the Financial Literacy Center. The salary was lower than he was used to. No bonuses, no business trips, no fine dining. He taught classes for retirees, young families, and students. At first, it was awkward. Then, he started to settle in. One day he told me, "You know, Mom, when you talk about what not to do with money, it leaves more of a mark than anything from a textbook." I just nodded. He was starting to grow up. At 48, he and Jana eventually divorced, quietly. No scandals. It seemed like the damage was done. Too many silent wounds had built up. She moved back to Voronezh to stay with her parents. We didn't talk about her. I knew it was their decision, and it wasn't my place to interfere. But the grandkids, they surprised me. Kirill started asking more about our family history. Kirill started asking questions about my parents, how I met Lenya, what it was like living on one salary in the 80s. One day, he even asked to see old photographs. Tanya, meanwhile, had quietly signed up for evening law courses. She told me later that something clicked in her after talking to Vera. "I realized," she said, "that I want to be like her. Smart, calm, strong, and fair." I smiled. "Then you will be," I said. "Just don't be afraid to say no, even to family. Especially to family." Igor began calling more often, without any reason. He'd ask how I was feeling, how the flower beds were doing. Sometimes he brought groceries or helped around the house. But the biggest change was in his pace. He no longer rushed. The old lines, "I have a meeting. I'll call you later. Not now, Mom," were gone. He listened. Truly listened. Once, I saw him standing by the living room window, looking at the garden. "You know, Mom," he said softly, "I always thought this house was Dad's, that he built it, that he was in charge, and you were just there." He paused. "But now I see, it was you. You built it. You held us together." I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around him. He was older now, gray-haired, tired eyes, rough hands, but in that moment, he was still my boy. Time passed. Autumn crept in quietly. Leaves began to fall. The air turned colder. One evening, over tea, I made an announcement. "I'm leaving," I said. "What? Where?" Kirill looked alarmed. "To Europe," I answered. "For 3 months." The room went silent. "You're serious?" Igor looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "Completely," I said. "To England, to visit the British Museum, to Paris, to walk the riverside, to Rome, to wander its streets, to Greece, to sit by the sea. I've been saving for years," I added, quietly, on a separate account. "And now, it's time." Igor lowered his eyes. "I didn't know. You didn't need to," I said gently. "Some things a woman should do just for herself." The whole family came to the airport to see me off. They hugged me. Some cried. Even Jana sent a message, "Safe travels, and thank you for everything." On the plane, I stared out the window and thought, family isn't about holidays or framed photos. It's about respect, about honesty, about never taking someone's voice, their home, or their right to decide. I wasn't fighting for control. I was fighting to be heard, and I was. I'd never traveled beyond the neighboring region, not in youth, not later. There was never time, never money, or I just told myself, It wasn't for me. But now, standing on a train platform in London, suitcase in one hand, cane in the other, I suddenly knew it was all mine. The museum, the bridges, the smell of coffee in another language. I'd spent my life putting it off. I visited the British Museum, stood for a long time in front of ancient artifacts, thinking, Lydia Petrovna, you spent your life solving other people's problems. Now, it's your turn. In Paris, I sat along the Seine, drinking coffee, watching tourists scramble with their maps. For the first time, I wasn't rushing anywhere. In Italy, I wandered quiet streets, ate pasta with porcini mushrooms, and listened, not to noise, but to myself. No pressure, no duties. In Greece, I lay on the beach, under the sound of waves, writing the names of all the cities I still wanted to see in a small notebook. Every Sunday, I called home. Kirill told me how he was making borscht from my recipe. Tanya asked for help with her coursework. Igor wanted to know where I was and how the trip was going. Even Jana sent a postcard. You turned out stronger than all of us. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. And I believed every word, because something had truly changed. Not around me, but within. I was no longer seen as weak, silent, or easy to dismiss. I had taken back my voice, and no one could speak for me anymore. When I returned, they were all waiting at the airport, with flowers, with signs that said, "Welcome home," with hugs, and surprisingly, a newly renovated bathroom. Surprise! Kirill grinned. We all pitched in. You always said you wanted to replace the tiles, Tanya added, but kept putting it off. I stepped inside and cried. Not because of the tiles. What moved me most was being heard. Now there's a new globe in my bedroom and a notebook beside it where I write down the countries I'll visit next. On the nightstand is a photo, me in a scarf, smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower with a handwritten note that says, not too late, because it never is. You don't need anyone's permission. The past isn't erased, and it shouldn't be. It's part of who I am, but it no longer controls me. I'm not just a mother, a grandmother, a teacher. I'm a woman with the right to dream, even at 73, especially at 73. After returning home, I felt different, not younger, just more whole, as if I'd gathered every piece of myself I'd given away over the years, to students, to my son, to my husband, to my grandchildren, and brought them back. I wasn't less for being all those things, but I was more when I was all of me. The house felt like home again, not just a place to live, but truly mine. I woke up not to alarms, but to the sunlight crossing the wall. I baked pies, read books, listened to silence. I found myself drawn back to old loves, knitting, journaling, sharing my favorite books with Kirill and Tanya. People began visiting, not just for holidays or out of obligation, but sincerely. Valia from next door would drop in for tea. My old colleague Galina called and said, "You're back? Let's meet." Even a former student stopped by. Vera had given her my number. She was the quiet girl from back in 2001, now a grown woman, a mother of 3. You once told me I was smart, she said. That was the first time I believed it, and just hearing that warmed me deeply. The family kept changing too. It felt like someone peeled off an old film, and we were finally seeing one another clearly. One day, Jana called from Voronezh. I did a lot of things wrong, she admitted. I was afraid your house would always be his, and I'd always feel like an outsider. You could have just talked to me, I said. I could have. I didn't know how. Thank you for telling me, I replied. No blame. Just growth. Just truth. Igor invited me to one of his workshops. He was teaching a session on personal finance for retirees and asked if I'd come and listen. I went, sat right in the front row. He spoke with confidence, without reading from notes. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Everything I know, I learned from my mom. She's not an economist, but she taught me how to live and never give up." I nearly cried, but just nodded. At the end, a woman in a headscarf came up to us. "Is that your mother?" she asked. "Thank you both. You turned my whole day around." Sunday lunches became a tradition. Nothing fancy, just good food, heartfelt conversation, and no masks. One day, Tanya brought an application. "I'm applying for a law master's program," she said. Vileva agreed to be my advisor. Kirill started talking about getting a mortgage, but only when he felt truly ready. He came for advice, asked questions, listened. I realized they weren't just older now. They were aware, intentional, grounded. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea and watching the sunset settle on the old maple by the gate. Igor stepped out beside me. "Mom, I did a lot of things wrong," he said. "I lost a lot, and you kept something," I answered. "What?" he asked. "Yourself. and the chance to rebuild. He sat down next to me, and we sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "I'm glad you couldn't open the door that day." I turned to him. He looked toward the street. "Because if you had, I would have gone on thinking you were weaker than you are." "And now?" I asked. "Now I know," he nodded. "You're strong. And this house, it's not just walls, it's respect, and a place where no one gets thrown out." I smiled. And suddenly, I felt calm. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. 6 months had passed. Some would say that's not much, but to me, it felt like a whole new chapter, written in a different handwriting. Not one that erased the past or sugarcoated the truth, but one that started honestly. From the moment I realized silence was no longer an option, the house felt alive again. Not just standing, but living. There were voices in the hallways, doors closing, the smell of fresh baking in the air. It wasn't the life I once imagined. It was something better, mine. On Sundays, the family gathered. Someone brought a salad, someone brought jokes, someone brought quiet exhaustion. But everyone came willingly, not out of obligation. I never reminded anyone of debts, or of hurt feelings, or of the locks. Not because I forgot, but because I forgave. And that's something else entirely. One day, Tanya came home from university holding a small black box. "Kirill and I chipped in," she said. "Just a gift, just because you're here with us." Inside was a pendant, small, shaped like a door. On the back was an engraving. "You're the one who holds the home, even when you're not let into it." I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I placed it around my neck. I still wear it. In December, I applied for a new visa, this time to Japan. I'd always dreamed of seeing the maples of Kyoto. And now, I could, because I no longer had to justify what I wanted or explain why it mattered at my age. You know what I've realized? Aging isn't a shadow. It's not waiting for the end. It's the season where you finally get to live not for others, but alongside yourself. It's the time you allow rest, travel, boundaries, locks, and the right to change those locks, to open your door only for those who know how to enter it kindly. One day on the street, a neighbor called out, "Lydia Petrovna, you look younger somehow." "I just came back," I smiled. "From where?" "From the part of myself I gave up for everyone else. I've returned to me." On my nightstand, there's a notebook. In it, a list of cities. The word retirement no longer feels like an ending, just a pause between trips. And the word grandmother doesn't mean I have to stay home with the kids, unless I want to. If I'd rather walk alone through Istanbul or Florence, that's what I'll do. Life doesn't end as long as you're living, and no sun, no lock, no letter can erase who you are. And if anyone believes you've outlived your worth, open the door. Just not for them, for yourself. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story.